Bonjour, bonjour. Hello, everybody. Good morning.
Exactly. Good morning. Thanks everyone for coming.
We're going to start slowly. Not slowly. We're going to start maybe intensely.
Exactly. We only have an hour, so
Yeah, actually, it's not be slow. I would love to, before we just really get into the talk, to say that I wanted to pay homage in a way or another to a very dear friend of mine who left us on Monday, and here he is. He's Wojtek Havel. You might have known him, maybe met him, part of the Havlovi, an extraordinary music duet from Prague. I have a very long story. Some people also in the audience have a very long story with them. And I went to Prague back in the days, like 15 years ago, with some friends. We did a film that I'm sort of like showing some images, Little Blue Nothing, and many other recordings over the years. So this little exchange is obviously dedicated to him, to Wojtek Havel. Thank you so much and welcome.
thanks, Vincent. Okay, so my name's Russ, and I'm the editor of Songlines magazine. And we did a feature not too long ago on Vincent and his work, which is 20 years of making films about music. And I wanted to actually read the kind of subheading that we had for this piece, because I thought it was a nice kind of introduction to the talk today. And we put, French filmmaker Vincent Moon walked away from a career documenting Western rock royalty to create what he calls a slightly gonzo film collection produced all around the world, but which, in other words, could be called the most impressive and vast ethnomusicology experiment of the 21st century. And exactly, so we'll get a bit more into that kind of that ethnomusicology side shortly. But yeah, this talk is called From Rock to Rituals, so we are going to start with the rock in that part.
Yes, I was thinking maybe to kind of like follow the title a bit and kind of like find maybe a little short extract of my approach to rock music, just to start, which then led me to explore more musical genres all around the world.
Sure. Before we get into that, though, can I just ask one thing, which was the one thing I've never asked you before is about how you actually came to make those first music videos. Because I know you studied photography, and your first films were kind of all photographic with music. And then from there, suddenly you were filming Jamie Liddell, an amazing English singer, and then The National, kind of right after that. Like, how did you meet those people, and how did you film them? Like, how did that initial?
So I grew up in Paris, and I was in my 20s. I was going out a lot, going basically to see many concerts, and my practice was actually, as you said, like more with photography, and especially my language was very much linked to a certain aesthetic of street photography, of often very black and white, Joseph Kudelka, William Klein, and all those like names, and basically I was so obsessed with music. I was really going every night to see shows at the time, and I started to like make photos of live shows and so on. And I was just basically interested in how could I approach music, live music. Really, it's very important. From the very beginning, I was really interested in like filming live music and giving it that intimacy that I was looking for in my photographic research. And then little by little, I started to like document so much, again photographically, that I became quite friend with some bands, and especially, as you mentioned, The National, who then asked me to do more with them, and then we started to like basically, actually the story exactly goes that I was with The National in Paris. It was their second or third concert maybe, and I did a photo session with them, and a few months later, they sent me the cover of their new album, Alligator, at the time, and it was actually the photos I took with them. And I was like, hey, do you like it? And I was like, wow, it's amazing. I was so young. I was like, wow, yeah, okay, great. And then I told them, okay, next time you pass by, we make a film. And I was like, okay, and that's what we did. So we did. Then I started to make a film with them, but quickly on, it really went really to this idea of like, how do we film live music? For me, that's very much the beginning. That's why maybe I wanted to show you this little extract.
Exactly. Let's go for it.
So it's not going to be the national. No. It's going to be. It's something which I think is. It's a film that I've been. That I made with a wonderful band. I just show you a quick extract, okay? Named Health. It's pretty wild, from Los Angeles. But you will see the sort of like the desire to approach the music in a very radical way. Thanks. I didn't want to go too far there. But basically, it was this idea, as you can see, that I was not trying to depict what was really happening. Right? Sure. There was not this idea of like having multiple angles on the stage and basically trying to correctly render all the movements of all the musicians. It was very much the exact opposite of like, how do I basically end up in the crowd and sort of like try to transmit that energy, you know? Which is exactly how do you tell the story? Do you tell a story with a wide angle in a sort of like more objective way, or do you tell the story by basically infiltrating and creating a very subjective, I guess, approach to it?
Yeah. I mean, what's amazing to me is how right at the beginning you kind of had that approach straight away, which is to make, and it was very saturated images, which I mean, even from those first videos with the films with the National. And then straight through to there. But you had that, so, I mean, I was looking at the artists you worked with, like in 2007, 2008, and I think for anyone who's into like indie rock or indie folk, this was kind of the royalty of the day. Arcade Fire, Bon Iver, Beirut, the Low, St. Vincent, Sufjan Stevens, just all these amazing artists. And then you had a moment, which you've spoken about this kind of in various interviews, but where you decided that actually working with, I guess, artists assigned to big Western labels, essentially, that you wanted to kind of push away from that and find something else. Can you tell us a little bit about what the moment was, or the incident where, your approach changed to what you wanted to film?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few little moments which I think are quite interesting, but basically, I'm going to use my website, which we just finished a new website for to host all of this work. So I think it's going to be a nice way to navigate as well and so on.
Well, exactly. So hopefully this question will then get us into the world, the fact that we're going to suddenly expand into the wider world, which this kind of website does an amazing job of showing. Just
exactly.
How much
so
you
I answer the question, and then we'll dive into the website. But basically, I started to make this series of films named The Takeaway Shows with a friend of mine. He had a website, La Blogothèque, and we wanted to basically document live music in a very intimate, way, as I was saying, in a very subjective way. Remember, like, we're talking about 2004, 2005, where basically at the same time you have YouTube appearing. YouTube is not that old in the sense, I mean, I think it's like really 2004 or 5. You have small cameras, you have small computers, you have really good technology almost in your pocket. And I was really interested in that because I did a cinema school, cinema university, and they told me about John Ford, Alfred Hitchcock, and all that stuff. And I was like, well, I'm never going to do that stuff, right? This is just an impossible amount of like production team, and I was extremely shy as well at the time. So I could not really imagine myself working in a team with lots of people around. So then I was like, well, those new cameras on the market, all those little microphones, maybe we can do something really cool with that, explore the world and create a very direct relationship with the other. So that's where really my practice of filmmaking really starts. And so we did those like series of takeaway shows. You mentioned some of them in Beirut, Bon Iver, a lot of like this indie rock scene at the time, which was really all emerging at the same time. And the project for like, we ran the project full on for like maybe 3 years. It was incredible success. There was just absolutely no content like this at the time. It inspired a few other projects. So it was sort of like, it seemed really a very good sign of the times. This was, well, internet as a way to relate to another form of intimacy with the other. Fine, so we were really trying to explore this. And in a very interesting way, the project got so successful that I had to like basically go on tour and document bands. And I went on tour with the National actually, and I was actually the only time I came to Manchester was with National years ago. And then I went on tour with the Arcade Fire as well to document a tour in Europe and in the US with them. And then that's the moment where you just realize that your desire to connect in a very simple way with the musician, with the people in front of you, is getting in trouble. Because there's just a lot of interest. There's suddenly all those other people getting in the game, basically, music business and management and so on. And I freaked out. I really freaked out. Well, there's some really pretty dark stories at some point, but I'm not going to share those ones. But at some point, you're like, whoa, I'm not in it for that. I'm not really excited to keep on making films and sort of like it was becoming simply a product, It was a great product to basically promote artists at the time, to show them finally far from the music videos of the 90s, but basically suddenly, wow, we show the intimacy, we show the simplicity of it. But what I was looking for, this very improvised encounter, that was getting lost because again, suddenly that intimacy, that relationship started to get over-prepared in advance. The label was like, whoa, we just want to be sure about the results. And I was like, you cannot be sure about the result with me, that's the point. It's like, basically, play the game or not. So anyway, and then at the exact same time, I went to do a project in Cairo. I got invited, but mostly with basically Western musicians, doing a project in Cairo with some local people. And I was like, I was not too much into the project. And quickly on, it was my first time in Cairo, and I started to hang out with some people who really knew the city, and especially the traditional music, the local music. And at some point, one night, one guy told me, "You want to see something secret?" I was like, yeah, that's cool. Let's show me something very like hidden maybe. And he's like, yeah, okay, I take you to a very special ceremony tonight. I never went to a ceremony back in the days at the time, I knew, of course, I started to get interest about relationship between music and trance. But in a way, I was very remote from such a realization that going to live music, going to be in the middle of the people, even filming was a way to reach that kind of like trance state, Except nobody told me what it was. So I would go into concert and completely lose my mind, and I was like wondering what was happening, My society didn't give like the proper sort of like care for modified states of consciousness, to put it simply. And not those ones, We are a very alcoholic-based society. We are not really into another form of trance, but that we will come later. Anyway, And that night in Cairo, they took me to a czar ceremony. And some of you might know what is a czar, because a few years ago, actually, in that marvelous Womex in Porto, played Mazaher. And Mazaher is this extraordinary ensemble from Cairo, which they do play czar music. That's what czar is. In the real context of the czar, basically, they took me to a whole little street in Cairo, and I heard the drumming from far. It was resonating. It was getting really very, very exciting. Something was like in the air. And I arrived in that little room, and there in the room, there was like two women putting on trance another one, and drumming and chanting, and I was absolutely, it did like this in my mind. Wow, that's what I'm looking for. That's this kind of like relationship that I really want to explore. And it changed my life. And then I came back the next week and asked them, can you put me in trance? And that's what they did. And then I took the camera and I started to like basically even film, explore already this relationship. How can I film my own trance relationship with the people? So that was my first film, and maybe I'm going to open the map, actually. So there we can see where it is.
There we go.
So yeah, on the map, you can basically start to zoom in and find lots of different stuff.
So this would have been, was it like 2009 when you filmed those first Czar rituals? Because I know Planètes started 2010, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, here we go, 2010.
Yeah, 2010 actually, yeah. And I just show an extract while I talk on top of it, but basically, one of those ladies is part of Mazaher, actually, by the way. In my language, from the beginning until now, as you can see there, Libet was really interested into. I've always been interested in like the what we call the plan séquence, which is a very good term in French. Basically, those long shots, uncut long shots, and then uncut long shots. For me, was very important to build in terms of bringing the eyes of the other into the moment and never cutting. So basically, if the long shot with the music goes for enough long, at some point, you bring the people there. You sort of like make them almost enter the scene. So I guess from early on, I kind of realized, especially around that time, I started to refine much more my practice and my way of filming. And I was really interested in like building that almost hypnotic relationship with the moment. And I realized it was all about dancing. And dancing well, you know, finding the harmony with the people. And that's basically me dancing with them, you know, and getting at the same time like, whoa, trying to focus, trying to zoom in, zoom out, moving in harmony, but still at the same time losing myself in it. And I guess that's always been basically the goal, is like how to find that momentum where you're sort of like extremely aware and completely gone, you know?
I mean, the first time, did you literally just kind of throw yourself into it? Because I can't imagine, I still don't quite understand how you film all of these rituals, because you are right there in the middle of them. Like, was it, I mean, when you first approached the ritual, was it the kind of same approach to filming rock, which was just literally you just got yourself right in the middle and then just tried to...
Pretty much, except in a way that was obviously in general, and again, it's a case-by-case situation. I've done, up to this day, I think I've done more than 1,400 films, so it's like, there's a lot of different stories, you know, it's not always the same thing. How does it work? I'm like, well, it depends though. There is some like, sort of like general framework that I can tell you about, but in a sense, obviously, the difference between filming a music, more music-oriented, you know, purely band and so on, performance, and not on stage. Basically, I would take the musicians out, you know, and so it would be organized, and we would sort of like work together in that sense. When I went into the field of ceremonies and so on, it's happening. There is this like movement, energy happening, and then your goal is to find how you can fit in this, you know, in the most subtle way, harmonious way. So that was obviously this like, suddenly you're not really supposed to disturb, but at the same time you're not supposed to be discreet. So it was really again finding that in between. It's really about that balance, you know, finding that how your presence cannot disturb, but actually even add almost a little something, you know. So I've been just since then just like going to many ceremonies and trying to just find a way that I can participate as much as possible with the camera, and even, you know, as I've done a lot of like research on psychedelic ceremonies, ayahuasca, Santo Daime, and so on in Brazil. Well, how do you feel when you're high? You know, how do you feel when you're on ayahuasca? How do you basically find a way? And yeah, so it's a very organic experiment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're definitely the best person to answer those questions.
It's funny, I tell you. It's always. Yeah.
No, I was going to say with the article that we published in Songlines, like we fact check pretty much every piece of information, but when it came to the amount of films you'd made, it was like, well, I'm not sure we can count 1,400 films.
Yeah. Well, they're all documented, as you can see there.
Well, see them. They're all there.
And so, as you can see, I've done a lot of films around there in New York and it's and Canada and Montreal and so on. But that was mostly older stuff, you know. So if you go to the website, basically, obviously, you can find them all very lovely, lovingly placed. And that was Beirut, you know. My Brightest Diamond, lots of different stuff. That's a much more recent things, for example. So, what? Okay, that's a very interesting thing. What? Go.
I was going to say, did you want to say something about these films, or do you want to?
I just wanted to mention, actually, I know what you're going to go into, that basically I've always been interested to kind of put things on the same level. That's very much, there is no hierarchy in the way I present the works, and I really try to keep it as simple as that. Basically, obviously, my anarchist background brings it to the fact that I really like that all shapes meet a short film of 5 minutes or a feature film of 1 hour and a half, a film made in 2005 or a film made in 2020. They're all sort of like in the same, represented in the same way, you know? And I think it's very important for me because it allows different forms of connections in between forms, in between spaces and sounds, you know? And I really try to break down this hierarchy in a sense, especially in the world of cinema. There is like more than anywhere in the art worlds. I guess the cinema world is very much based on timelines and linearity and progression. You know, all those ideas of the Western world, which have been tricking us a bit. You know, and now it's very interesting to realize that. Exactly, cinema, you basically start small and go big, you know? I mean, it's sort of like this movement is that we also see in festivals and so on, is a bit problematic in a way. And I've always been interested like to make short, long, short. Now I'm mostly making short pieces. I'm much more interested in that, you know? So I wanted to show that this is like probably 10 years difference between this one with My Brightest Diamond and this is a research on a voodoo ceremony in Brooklyn. I don't have any images actually. I didn't finish yet that film, but that's a very interesting. So I've been slowly interested, like maybe going back to the same places where I filmed people, but suddenly with a completely different angle. And just next corner, you find there's this trance ceremony while there was a rock concert 10 years before. You know, it's kind of funny. Anyway, voila. But yeah, you wanted to go into something. You had a question, maybe, Russ?
Well, I was wondering whether we wanted to get the kind of audience involved a little bit, didn't we? So we kind of had an idea that we could just, if people came up with a suggestion for a city or a country or region, we could just find an interesting video of a film. Does anyone want to shout out with an idea of a place they might want to see a film from?
We're just going to show a short extract. Anyone share a story, please? Turkey?
Oh, you got loads from Turkey, surely, isn't it?
Yeah, okay, the thing I have with Turkey, the problem is that I did not really update in my website. This is the new website, but it's not fully updated. So I did a lot of very interesting new films in Turkey, especially around there in Konya. I was in Konya in December for the, how do you call it? Shebiarus, exactly, for the Rumi celebration. And it was 750 years, actually, of Rumi's death. So I did a lot of films there last December. They're not yet on my website. But then, this is a very film with Selda Bagjan, actually. You might know Selda Bagjan. There's a very, very interesting film. And then all those other films in Istanbul, Sabata Kiraz, Ismail Tunzaray. I go for this one, okay. Just like, because that's a very simple, basically very straightforward recording with Ismail Tunzaray and incredible musicians. We just went to the street and basically.
Aman yürüyen geldim yine üryan giderim. Üryan geldim yine üryan giderim de. Ölmemeye de fermanım mı var efendim? Can alıcı gelmiş, canım almaya. Benim can vermeye de dermanım mı var efendim?
There's something very interesting that happened back in the days. Still in a bit 10 years ago, sort of. I would easily bring musicians to the streets. Or something I will do here actually this week. I'm filming 5 bands outside. Probably, if you have any ideas for locations, actually, we have a few ones. But there, back in the days, we didn't have smartphones, and that the interaction, the social interaction in the street was extremely different. I mean, I think all of us in the room remember that maybe, but for me, filming at the time was marvelous because people were paying attention. You don't see anybody holding a phone in the background. We didn't have that. We didn't have a screen in between us and what's happening. And I think that was marvelous moment to really be able to also document music in such a way, on the spot and so on. Nowadays, it's very difficult. You have to almost organize that and basically really clearly ask people to not hold their phones. But when you want to create this improvised interaction with passers-by, it's just, that thing is gone anyway. You know.
So can I ask, so when you kind of uprooted from Paris and then you led a very nomadic lifestyle, traveling, I guess what would make you decide where to go next to film? Did you always have like an artist in mind, or like what was the little nugget that made you move to a different place to?
Kind of a mix of like desire for me to explore a place. Like I went on my own to Ethiopia for 3 months at some point. Got completely lost. Very interesting, fascinating trip there. But then a lot of the time as well, I would basically be maybe invited by a film or a music festivals, and I would be invited. I remember a trip where we got invited to show my films in Chile, and they wanted to book my return flight, and I was like, well, no, maybe I'm not going to return, And little by little, I realized that I didn't want to return, that basically I would benefit from such an invitation and then stay around and then keep exploring until another project comes up in the region, ideally, and so on. And so that's how I became basically nomadic, in a way. I just decided to quit having a base and stop having a base and really travel just with backpack, because the technology again that I was working with could fit on my back,
Sure. And how did you find the artists, basically? Because I've found so many amazing artists through your films. Because I discovered, I guess, your work in about 2010 when you put out all these incredible films of Brazilian artists, Tom Zé, Nana Vasconcelos, Dona Nechi. There was just so many. And then also all the Chilean ones as well.
I spent a lot of time in Brazil at the time. My first trip to Brazil was like a jackpot. You're like, how was it possible? I met so many extraordinary musicians. And also it was very interesting because, when you're curious, you just ask people around and then, and especially in a country like Brazil, it was very, very, very easy to get in touch with people, to get in touch with actually Elsa Soares, for example, that I made a film with at her place and so on. So it was very marvelous to travel around Brazil like that. A country that I came back many times after, especially to make a long project, Hybridos. But just to come back on your question, which was
how do you find all these artists? Because honestly, I've
just keep researching, right? I mean, that's what I do. Just keep researching on music, and my love for music has been also more and more refined. In a sense, after maybe 10 years of researching a lot on ceremonies, rituals around the world, I'm branching back sort of into Western forms of music in the past years, but also is exactly trying to find that in between, of ancient and futuristic, you know, as simple as that. It is basically how do we make that passage? How do we basically do re-encounter the wisdoms of the past through especially indigenous people and so on all around the world? But how do we basically use this to change this basically dramatically stupid society we live in nowadays? How would you basically re-empower ourselves by listening to the ancient ones and find new forms? And I'm always been interested in like those new forms, which they don't have to be very, very drastically different from the old ones. But how do we adapt ourselves to those times? I will play you a very special one now, but this is messy. How do I do this? Up like this, like that. Yeah. In that sense, I would like to play you a little song from a very wonderful lady I met a year ago, maybe in Greece. She's named Alkyone. I just play a bit of the song, but you can listen to it on my website as well. Alkyone, very, very beautiful. It's basically a traditional song that she revisits. Maria from Thessaloniki, by the way. For hours like that, but
exactly.
I won't do too many things. Anyway, Maria Alkyone, Alkyone, wonderful one. So basically, just like this encounter with Maria was a very interesting story, actually, if I may. I'll share it quickly with you. So I saw. I was 2 weeks before arriving in Greece. I had some local friends sending me different local music, you know. I was like, what do you think about that? And then they sent me a video of her, maybe actually even like singing that song in another video, and it was like, wow, that's amazing. Okay, sure, let's get in touch with her directly. And then I got her phone number, and we decided to exchange a little bit. But then I went to, I don't know if you know that place, which is a very special place, Mount Athos, which is this monastic peninsula. So I went for a pilgrimage on Mount Athos for a week. And on the day I came back, so you know that Mount Athos is this weirdly...
completely men, no?
Yes,
Is that right?
the only woman-forbidden place on planet. And so on the way back to Thessaloniki, from Mount Athos, it was a very crazy experience. I just basically was texting with Maria, and on the moment, she was like, I don't think I can do it. And it was 6 p.m. And we're like, well, I'm arriving in 1 hour. Let's have dinner. And then she joined for dinner, and basically we had a talk. And then we ended up like 2 hours later at our friend's studio doing that session, you know. And that for me was very beautiful. That simplicity of like, on the moment, we can actually just decide. We don't have to make big plans. which is basically also because I work mostly without money involved. You know, there's not really such. This is just this pure, just passion that I would like to have to dialogue with. So.
Sure. And how much do you actually film? Because the way that the musicians are always so natural, it kind of feels like this must be. You must have been there for hours, and just literally like we kind of suddenly eavesdrop on just like 5 minutes of that, or 10 minutes depending on the film, but of that experience. But yeah, how much do you actually film and kind of get them used to kind of the camera and you being
again,
there?
it depends, but I would say most of the time I just do one take. I love it because it keeps the mistakes as well, you know, and very often when you push it, you just want to erase all the imperfections and so on, but. Well, there's no point to me to erase those. I think it's just that's exactly, again, that in-between which is interesting, you know. I think it was 2 takes maybe with Maria. I'm not even sure. Maybe it was just the 1 take, you know. Recently I did another beautiful recording. It's also it's actually on the Blogotech, again, YouTube, with Daniela Pes, who's extraordinary Italian, mostly electronic musician, but she did just a song, guitar and voice, in a church in Lausanne in July. Wow, you have to see this. It's stunning. And it was just 1 take, just that 1 take. And we know it's like, oof, divine. But that's what you're looking for, that divine connection, you know? And then you cannot really organize it too much. If you organize it too much, you lose it. So it's just that, how do you basically keep that improvised relationship with reality? So magic can happen.
There you go. Shall we...
Maybe. Oh, I wanted maybe, as I am on Brazil, and as we've been talking about ritual ceremony without really showing much, maybe I should show you that, which is... So with my ex-partner, Priscilla, we did a very long research on the ceremonies. What is this? Oh, wait. Okay, I'm showing you something. I don't know what that is. Oh, that's not at all the video I thought. Ah, that's an international extract. I didn't even know this was online. Okay, that's cool. Let's have a look. Serio de Nazaré, Belém do Pará on the right, Ouro Preto, in Minas Gerais in the middle, the Mehinaco people and Shaman on the left in Mato Grosso. That's part of this very large project that we made named Híbridos, which was basically 4 years long research in Brazil. And we made more than 100 films, short films. We made a crazy website that I can actually show you. It's very, very beautiful. Yeah. And the website is very beautiful. I'm so happy with this website. Nobody makes websites nowadays. I know it doesn't make sense to make websites, unfortunately. But I really like that one. And on the website, you can see all the short films. So we made like all those different recordings, you know, with indigenous people, Afro-Brazilian rituals, Santo Daime, ayahuasca involving church, wow, this is incredible Umbanda ceremony during New Year's Eve in Copacabana Beach on Rio, incredible stuff. And so we made all those like different encounters and documents and so on with different people. And all of those are basically documented in this very lovely website where when you click, you have access to not only the film here, that's a very special film, a very pretty long one on a special candomblé Afro-Brazilian ceremony.
A assimilação a
it was a very special candomblé house, which was led by a French Mai de Santo, a mother of saint. Basically, the priestess was Mai Giselle, and she passed away a little bit after that. She's extraordinary. So basically, we made this like full-on website, and then you have all the text and so on, you know. I didn't choose this. Yemanja chose me, of course. Yemanja chose. You don't choose much, actually. You think you choose, but you don't. And then Mai Giselle, she even done the Buzios and so on. So we had this like very long project, which also was, and I should actually show this as well, which was also made of a feature film. What you just saw before, the 3-screen installation, that's something we did in a few. I did one in Liverpool, actually. Actually, I realized a few years ago. Sorry for that. And this is basically the teaser of the feature film. So basically, it was a project exploring different forms of cinema. How we actually, with the same research, you explore different forms of screens and relationship to people.
So with a project like that, just the amount of work that's gone into it, I mean, it's such a labor of love, 4 years, hundreds of films.
Insane.
Like
I lost my mind, yeah. That's probably
But
yeah,
how
lost
does
my
that
mind.
even
That was
hap-
not a good idea.
But
And
how-
because we did it for free, actually, no, we lost so much money in this. But we were not there to get money, but it was insane. It was completely insane.
But what was like? Did someone ask you to? Did someone ask you to make it, or was it just like we're going to do this, and let's see what happens?
No, we did it. Of course, this is nobody asked me to do that. Of course not. No, nobody would be crazy to ask anybody to do that. And so basically, we did this very long project. It was very interesting explorations of all those different forms. The forms of the trends and the forms of the images, and how do we intertwine them in a very interesting way. All the work we do, or the work I do in a way, is always published on Creative Commons, which is basically open source licensing. And so I'm a huge, how could I say? I'm very, very interested in like non-ownership, as simple as that. How do we use digital tools to reformulate a non-ownership form of culture and so on? It's not easy for that. The times are not going that direction. But I still publish all the work for free, and people can use it, reuse, and so on and so on.
I mean, what are your feelings towards the idea of ethnomusicology and the idea of kind of documenting music? Because I mean, that collection, just as one collection, is just nobody else has made anything like that. I mean, it's just hugely important in terms of anyone who wants to understand Afro-Brazilian spirituality and rituals and religion and so forth. But like, what's your relationship to, like, would you ever call any of these films musicological films?
No, I don't think. No, I would not call them like that in a sense, because it's not. I don't have such a background. I really am not at all. I really didn't study properly, which also gave birth, I guess, to what you do is also the result of not only what you did study, but also of what you did not. And I think this is very interesting. That the limits of in my knowledge gave birth to this. The limits in other people's knowledges will give birth to something else. And I'm really interested in the limits. That's basically how I try to look at how do you understand your own limits, and why should you respect those limits, understanding that from on the other side of that limit, there is the potentiality of someone else, you know? And this is very interesting because then, in a sense, you realize that my work is just trying to complement some other researches which are made in a more academic way, which are maybe made much more with words and so on. Apart from the Hybridos project I showed you, there is very, very few words. There is very few explanations. And I assume it very much because it's basically that's the way I like to bring people to that relationship with the sounds, the bodies of the other, is to get ourselves away, washed from those expectations, from those understandings, to also allow ourselves to develop our own imagination. You know, what is imagination? Well, imagination is a personal process that is basically given by the fact that you have in front of you something that you do not fully understand. And I really like to present also things in such a way.
I know they were hugely important when I was kind of really getting into Peruvian music, especially watching the film of the saxophone orchestras in is it
in Peru?
In Peru.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. It's really incredible musical culture.
Like once I saw that film, I was like, okay, now I understand it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, these guys. Yeah.
Now you understand. I mean, wow, you understand the understandable, man. The non-understandable. It's a marvelous culture of saxophone orchestras in the mountains of Peru, especially around in the region of. That music. An extraordinary musical culture, very peculiar to this region.
Yeah. And was this a specific event that they were partaking in this one?
Yeah, it's a specific event, but this is in a valley in the region of Huancayo. I think I said Huancavelica. It's nearby Huancavelica, but it's in Huancayo. And it's very famous that in the valley of Huancayo, it says that they have more parties than days per year. So basically this will happen every day in a different village, you know? And all those like orchestras are invited, and obviously they just go from a house to another house, they get offered drinks, so little by little things are getting, you know, funnier and funnier. So it's really amazing. It's marvelous and very strange as well, culture. Nobody I remember was able to fully explain me the presence of saxophones there. It's like, why so many saxophones? You have one harp, one trumpet, one guitar, and then 20 saxophones.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, maybe they got a good deal. Maybe, I don't know. It's incredible. The quality of that music is stunning. Like you know, I would say it's like Fellini in the Andes. It's extraordinary. Nino Rota. Anyway.
There was a thing that you said in the article that we published on you, where you spoke about the fact that on some occasions you would film various music in a location, and then at the end of that trip you would then create a film or a montage and then actually play it to the people there, to the local people who'd been filmed.
Yeah.
Like, and I thought this was just a really interesting way in terms of like what we were also talking about ethnomusicology and like actually the role of these films, where they can actually have like people being able to see themselves on these, you know, screenings that you would do. Like what was the reactions to that, and like how many times have you done that?
All the time I've been, of course, all the films not only give them back to the people, but especially now things are made much easier, you know. In a sense, I was criticizing a lot, and I do criticize a lot, obviously, the use of smartphones in our society. I think it's a nightmare. But it made contacting people, like, you know, deep in the Andes or in any remote island in Indonesia, very simple. So in a sense, what I do nowadays, as soon as I finish a film, not necessarily just on the spot, because I have 200 films not finished now. It's a bit messy. But I basically send them the film and ask them for feedback. It's like, do you like it? Is there anything you don't want to see in it? And then we sort of like find with a few exchanges, a form that everybody's happy with, and then we publish it, and then people use it, of course, as they like. The thing is that nowadays everybody is watching, not only watching but also making images. It's also very drastically different regime, as I like to say, regime of images. Do you say regime of images? Does it make sense? Regime, it's a very specific word to say diet of images, but it's not really. It's a very different realm, let's say, of images that we're living in now. This was made a bit more than 10 years ago, and now my approach to recording is also changing because of that. Because in a sense, let's not see this as a way to preserve. Okay, this is not an archival work. Not anymore. In a sense, the idea of like archiving nowadays is basically confronted to the fact that everybody's recording all the time in any celebration anywhere, and it's a nightmare in general. It's really messy. I was in Baghdad recording a Sufi ceremony, and I was the only one with the big camera, but there was like 200 small cameras. 200. Everybody was like fucking like filming like that, and there was like 5 musicians. You're like, well, what do we do with that, you know? So it's a very different. That's why also I moved a lot with this idea of like the live cinema and so on that I explored, which is sort of like how do I reconstruct, rework those recordings in a different way.
Yeah. So should we get into that a little bit then, more the live cinema, because this is kind of, you've been doing lots of different.
We don't have much time left. Yeah, I share a little thing about the live cinema. Some of you might have seen. I did one in Porto at the Womex Porto 3 years ago, and that's something I can like still I do pretty often anywhere in very different contexts. I'll play you some stuff and I talk about it. But it's an improvised live editing session based on, in general, all of the recordings I have. So I have access to all my films, and I deconstruct and reconstruct them on the spot. And those live cinema performances, which have been so far around an hour long, I'm really extending them now much more. You know, I'm doing more like 6 to 8 hours long sessions. Because if you want to get deeper, and I think obviously we can talk about, again, then back to trends and so on, you have to get there for longer. So it's also a mix of like different site-specific creations. The image before was in a church in Paris in collaboration with some choir. There is some other stuff. Like there was a gong night in Berlin, 6 hours long gong night recently. This was in Porto in a different university context. So it's like each time like adapting to the context. But my interest, my research is really very much based on how do you share, that spirit, you know, that energy. How do you try to reformulate it in a way, and how do we reconstruct modern forms maybe of like ceremonies together, you know?
And what kind of locations are you doing these?
Ideally, not cinemas. That's the only thing I try to avoid is like cinema venues. They're like really not made for physical relationships. And I'm really interested, like for example, like an old factory in Berlin is like an ideal place. But I really like the intimacy also of playing at people's places. Or I like when you deconstruct the context again. You know, when you invite people in a place and they don't know. They don't have a specific set of like how does it work. Again, I think it creates a much more exciting interaction. This one though, especially the music here in the back, this is an incredible. What you heard was a very beautiful creation. For example, we made in Fez, in Morocco, where we collaborated with some Sufi brotherhood, and we documented them for like 5 days. We documented a beautiful ceremony, and then on the last day, the world was created. We made a show with basically in a big screen, me and Priscilla back in the days playing live, and the Sufis on stage. And then it became this like extraordinary in between the performance, let's say, of what they were doing, us playing with the images and the sounds of the film, and all this going towards the ritual, and then they sort of like redid the ritual on stage, or I was also showing the ritual in images, and people started to fall in trance back in the audience and so on. And I was like, that's where it's very interesting, that intersection, to find it again, you know, to realize that again, you know, this dualistic relationship, sacred and profane, as it's okay, we have to go beyond that nowadays, you know. If we want to expand a bit consciousness, we do definitely have to reconsider how do we bring back a non-dualistic approach in our artworks. It's a long talk, and I think it's like there's 30 seconds left, so it's just stupid to go on that now. But anyway, maybe we can,
Well,
we can stay a bit more. Yeah, it's like one. If we can stay a bit longer together. You're on your
should
way.
we get some questions?
I
I think.
maybe we can ask some questions. Maybe. Yes.
Is there a microphone to be sent out?
Maybe So, thank you so much. So my question is, how do you build trust when you go into these communities as an outsider with like some equipment which is not natural to that environment, like the camera?
Which is not natural too.
Like to the ritual environment, like you go with a camera.
Again, I think it's getting much more natural than it was, definitely,
Yeah.
in many levels. How do you build trust? Basically, I've always clearly exposed my work and my approach and so on. I'm just showing you also this other entry on the website, so you have all the films there if you don't know what to do tonight. You know, and it's just cheaper than Netflix, I tell you. No, but seriously, basically, I'm not spending a ton of time in the communities to build such a relationship, or sort of like, I'm really trying to make it fast, in a sense, to connect with the people in a very direct way, being very transparent, and then allowing basically that recording process to happen without any of us falling into an intellectual relationship. Or I don't want to put it simply, I don't want to project. And it's very idea, because projecting have this double meaning, you know, I mean, projecting images, but also projecting images in your mind. So I'm really trying to avoid projecting images in my mind. To do that, I have to basically build a relationship on a shorter time frame. And this is a dance. And again, I guess every time it's a very different, process. I can give you tons of. I think there's a different story for every time. But basically, it's really about stepping forward towards the other and being very clear on your intentions and so on. And again, every time it changes and so on. And nowadays, we live in a society where actually things are completely recorded. You know, most of the ceremonies where I was, what did I do? I filmed the Sufi ceremonies in Barcelona, with the Moritz, Senegalese Sufi branch, which is quite well spread around the world. And beautiful ceremony, circle of men and women as well, but more in the back. And they were just like basically they're live streaming the stuff. They're just live streaming it. And so I'm just mostly trying to avoid the cameras, their own cameras, than anything. So in a sense, we live in a much more complex world in that, there, again, it's not two sides. It's just very complex, intertwined relationship with what do we do with our images, what do we do with our recordings and so on. So, but again, I think the people are very much used to images now. It's everywhere, much more than we would expect. I remember it was like almost 10 years ago, amongst the Mehinako tribe in Xingu, largest indigenous reserve in the world, south of the Amazon. And the Mehinakos, I remember them at night, they were watching on the TV a ceremony that someone in the tribe filmed that they did like a few days before. And the ceremony was like 6 hours long, and the film was 6 hours long. So I was watching it. I was like, well, it's amazing. It's you watch it in real time again, Well, is it a good or a bad thing for them? I don't know. The way they deal with your images, But yes, things have been changing very fast recently in that regard. Yeah, I hope it answers your questions. Yes. Yeah, please.
Hello, I'd like to thank you and Russ for a brilliant session. I've got a head full of questions.
Cool,
but
cool.
I
cool.
wanted
Let's
to
have
focus
a chat later as well.
on what you're doing here at Womex, because you mentioned that you were thinking about filming, I think, 5 films.
Yep.
And I was particularly taken, like so many of the films that you've done, they're either rituals or they're artists who don't define themselves as international musicians. And almost by definition, an artist who comes to Womex is interested in making an impact beyond their own culture, the place where they live. And I wondered what you're doing in Womex, what we can see that grows out from these things, and whether there's any chance you might do a live cinema thing, because that looks like fun too.
Hey, okay, there's a few things there. It's my third time at Womex. The first 2 times, thanks to my wonderful best friend Luca, here present. I got invited to show some films first, actually, and I did a live cinema in Porto, but I also already recorded some bands. And in Porto, we did an extraordinary session. We did like 10 recordings over 4 days. Marvelous films. They were all then published on the Womex YouTube. Same 2 years ago, but I did less. And this year I'm gonna film 5 different bands. It starts this afternoon, and you can catch up with me later if you want to join some of the sessions in case. But obviously the sessions are not gonna be on stage. They were gonna basically go probably in pubs. I was like thinking, why don't we take 5 films in 5 different pubs maybe? We'll see. It's again keeping the improvisation enough, and then we will publish this actually on the Blogothèque in December. So that's one thing. About the live cinema, yes, I think we should try to organize that. Maybe for Sunday evening, we'll see. We're discussing that. Maybe if you want, I can do a. Can I take a bit of time after the Q&A? I do a little live cinema now. Huh? Yeah, I mean, you can go. Actually, you can go if you want. You can also stay. I'm staying. So, anyway. But anyway, if you have any other questions, please. For now. Yeah, please.
Yeah, hello. I already attended. I had a chance to attend one of your live cinema shows, which was quite spectacular, I must say. But the question that raised to my mind is those all these people you film in their intimacy, and especially during those rituals, you bring them back to life during those live cinema sessions. And are they aware that you are using the image and to mix them one with another? Like there was some Indians from the Amazon region with some, I don't know, Orthodox ceremonies, and it's quite spectacular. But do all these people that are filmed know that
as much as possible? Definitely, as much as possible.
And are they okay with that, I guess?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you make them okay with that, in a sense? How do you sort of like, because in a sense, I would sort of like have to do a live cinema properly in front of everybody. I've done it as much as possible. In Brazil, I played in front of a lot of indigenous people, for example, just to make sure that it was sort of like respecting their approach, and their feedback was extraordinary, honestly. And they were like, wow. They were like, oh yeah, it looks very much like in the trance, They, very much. They were. I think there's also like this approach, obviously, to trance, to like let's say. I went pretty far into different forms of shamanism and so on. And in that sense, I felt it also opened some deep possibilities of interaction. Obviously, my understanding of reality kind of like went a little bit somewhere else there. And obviously then now I'm sort of like thinking how much I can really let everybody know clearly about that, especially in a time where we are not in a movement towards opening ourselves and our basically practices. It seems that the times are basically backwards. Unfortunately, well, I do fight for basically this constant exchange and explorations of wisdom, of tools, of so on, especially when you're talking about non-material properties, in a sense. But again, what are properties in a sense that most of the people I met, they do not really consider their own practice as being their own properties. It's a very tricky, it's an extremely complex question. In a sense, I'm very much considering this nowadays in my own practice. How do I make it very clear, that people are basically feeling respected about the way that of course, there's all those like dialogues I'm trying to make in between those different spaces and time.
So what do you tell them at the end of the session when you film them after the ritual? Okay, I filmed, and what's next? Do they expect something from what you did? They know that they are going.
If they expect me to give back the recordings,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
which is obviously what I do, and I make it very clear that I'm basically not making money on those films, but that they can do. They can actually encourage people to to deal with that. Not anymore now. It's like 10 years ago. There was a lot of people who are printing their own DVDs and selling that. So I was like, yeah, maybe you should do it like this in a way. But that was not my goal, my own personal goal. So in a way, it's very complex to kind of like, how could I say? I try to explain exactly, of course, all the like possible uses of that material and so on, as much as possible, for sure.
Merci.
Maybe another questions, let me.
Hi, I just sort of wondered what the breakdown in how much pre-planning is there in terms of your trips and the people you're going to meet and how you're going to talk to them, and how much do you leave to chance when you get there? So in other words, are you setting up the sessions extensively before you go, or do you sort of do some general research and then arrive and see what happens?
It's again, if it really depends on the encounter, on the moment, and so on. I try to really leave improvisation at the core of it as much as possible. I really like to really not plan at all. Just yesterday morning, actually, I met up with a wonderful musician in Manchester, not part of the Womex. I just wanted to meet her. She has been a big fan of her music. Nobody really knows her. I mean, no, sorry, Susie, it's not true. She's not here, thanks. But actually, she's a very intimate musician, Susie Mangion. I don't know if anybody have heard about her. But basically, I sent her a message like a month ago saying, hey, can we meet? And I would love to make a little film with you. And then I showed up at her place yesterday morning, and then we had a tea. She prepared a few songs on piano, and then we went on piano, and then little by little we kind of like explored more, and at the end we did an incredible song on Shruti box outside in the park because it was sunny. Like, wow, how do you plan that? Well, just go with the flow, right? You know, just be open to basically have enough time to, well, on the way back to the tram, you know, we're like, it's really nice. Why don't we do something now? So that is what I call adaptation. You know, and just basically try to adapt yourself to the moment, to the conditions, and how you rebound. You know, there's just being. So that's what my practice is. So you just basically organize a few elements before, especially when you're not talking about the ceremony, which is going on in any case. But if you have this like a relationship with the musicians, well. Let's organize, but not too much, you know, just that in between. That again.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Last question, maybe? Oof. Maybe it's going to be time for lunch, actually. I'm getting a bit tired. Yeah.
Catalogue of music on Bandcamp also, which is it's like over 250 albums on there, so thousands of tracks. And I just wanted to ask, like, in terms of that, putting those songs out there on Bandcamp, is it the same kind of approach as with the films, like in terms of for people to kind of just to I guess stumble across them, or people who are researching that particular music or artist or country or whatever, to actually find that and supplement what they're doing? Or like, what's the kind of idea behind why you wanted to put all the audio out there as well as the films?
So it's kind of funny. I don't use really Bandcamp anymore. I used it a lot for the basically I used it a lot to publish. Let's see, it's kind of crazy. So you can see the times there, right? There is nothing else than part 1, part 2, part 3. It allowed me to actually upload an entire ceremony. Let's say we are in the artistic world in general. We've been reducing, and our attention span has been reducing drastically. There is one big difference when you tap into what you would call a ceremony, a ritual, a gathering, a prayer. It's often time, the time relationship. This is not going for 45 minutes. This is not a showcase, sorry. This is actually a full-on 6, 8, 10 hours long. And I was like, maybe it's very interesting to like let people listen to the entire affair. I don't know if everybody done that, you know. I see that not many people have been supporting this, but anyway. But in any case, for me it was very interesting to like, okay, let's use those platforms to actually give the entire sort of like scope of the ceremony, you know. Let's not cut it too much, you know. So I've been using Bandcamp a bit for that, yeah. But it's been a long time, and I'm not sure I'm gonna go back to use Bandcamp. Just enough things, you know, on my plate now.
Cool. Okay, well, shall we wrap it up? So vincentmoon.com is the place to go to.
Yes.
To find all of these.
Yes, exactly. If you can, there is also this other website that I don't really use anymore, Petites.Earth, where you can see more of the, especially let's say the creations. I was mentioning some of those creations. For example, this is a collaboration we did in Rajasthan with some Kawali singers. So we ended up basically doing a live cinema with the Kawali family there on stage, you know. We did quite a few, and I'm doing more and more of those experiments with music. I don't know if you know Atis Noit, a wonderful Japanese singer. And this is basically a show that we made in 3 days, based only on like recordings, like 2 days of recordings, and then 1 day just on stage, just playing together and so on. So yeah, you can explore all that, but the main website is this one, vincentmoon.com, where you can find all the stuff. Et voilà.
Lovely stuff. Well, I think we've done an all right job of summing up 20 years and 1,400 films in an hour and a little bit, but you know.
Yeah. I hope it was okay. If you have any more questions, I will be around in the next few days, so do not hesitate to come towards me and have a little chat, okay? The Greek singer, yeah. Alkyone.
Akyone, isn't it?
Yeah, there she is. Alkyone.
Okay. She's on the Songlines CD, I think.
Ah,
that came with
trop.
the issue a couple of issues in it.
Definitely. Et voilà, les amis.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Vincent.
Great festival. Ciao, ciao. Merci, mon ami.